particular panel is a combination of specialists. We've got people who are in legacy planning, we've got lawyers, we've got people in risk management and strategy, we've got specialists in governance, because all of this comes together and it fits under those three pillars that Pius talked about this morning. So before we get into it, I'm going to go ahead and ask Paul or Regina to go ahead and play Nike's video. But just before we watch her video, I do want you to know who she is. Nike Anani is a co-founder of a firm that connects families and helps people create legacies. She's an entrepreneur, she's a speaker, she's a consultant. She even has a podcast that is called The Connected Generation. So if you have a chance, please do look out for it. And her expertise is really in helping, especially founders, create generational wealth by having those conversations that we heard the previous panelists speak about. It's getting to understand what the client wants, what legacy means to them, and helping them put the plan together to make it happen. So Paul, if you could please go ahead and play Nike's video, that would be fantastic.
Good evening. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Nike Anani, and I will be discussing on foolproofing the future of your family enterprise. This is a pre-recording, as unfortunately I am not available for the live conference. However, I do believe that this will be very useful for you. Should you have any queries, questions, comments, feel free to contact me directly so we can have a conversation. So I'll start off with a story to highlight why this is important. Why is it important that we foolproof the future of your family enterprise? A few years ago, a friend of mine's father died prematurely. He had a terminal illness that killed him within 6 months. My friend was in her mid-20s at the time and was obviously devastated. Beyond having to grieve the loss of her father, who she was so close to, she was in a precarious situation where the family's financial security was wiped. Her father had been the breadwinner, and no one really understood how to run the family business. In addition, his assets were not very well protected, and people claiming to be his children surfaced an alleged ownership to his properties, leading to a legal battle. My friend, she was the oldest in the family. Luckily, she was financially independent, but her 2 younger sisters were in the UK at the time. They were in university. And so herself and her mum now had to shoulder the heavy financial burden of paying for their international school fees. Her reality changed overnight. Going through that, watching my friend deal with both grief and anxiety for her future at the same time, it pained me dreadfully. And I'm guessing you might know a version of that story, as it is so prevalent on the African continent. The business was not able to withstand the death of the founder, a scarily common phenomenon this side of the world, where only 2% of Nigerian family businesses will make it past generation 1, compared to 33% globally. The irony is that my friend's dad's death was my awakening. It was my wake-up call to want to see more, resilient family enterprises on the African continent. A resilient family enterprise, it will not collapse as a result of death, incapacitation, economic shocks, change in regulation, or technology. It may be thrown off course for a little while and may have to course correct. However, it will withstand whatever adversity it faces. So today, that's what we'll be talking about, is how can we foolproof the future of your family enterprise? A lot of what I will share with you are lessons learned through my personal journey as a business owner, through both triumphs and trials. Why is this important? Protection from poverty. I'm from Lagos, Nigeria, and unfortunately, Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world, now with over 88 million people living on less than $1 a day, with over 50 youth unemployment rate. And so, you know, academic degrees are no guarantee of financial security. It's important that we're able to empower ourselves, to free ourselves from this plague African soil. We lack a safety net. We don't have a social safety welfare system, unlike Europe or North America. This is our safety net, our family businesses. We can ensure that our family businesses become generational wealth machines, generating wealth that ensures that our next generation have food, shelter, education, access to capital, to start their own businesses, which will be their sources of livelihood. So it's really important that we create wealth and protect wealth that becomes a safety net for the future generations to come, and that we train the next generation so that they are also able to create wealth themselves. Second reason is to leave a legacy. So beyond promoting multi-generational success, it's really about who is Africa and does the world really know who she is, right? I remember watching Chimamanda Adichie's speech on TED Talks years ago when I was in university, and it was titled The Danger of the Single Story. And it really resonated with me. It resonated strongly with me. The world does not know Africa's views on so many arenas of life, and it is our responsibility to showcase who we are by exporting our ideas, our culture, entertainment, goods and services to the global stage. Family businesses, I believe, are a great vehicle to do that. Also, not only exporting across space, passing down across time. Family businesses are really good at passing down family values, which speak to this is who we are, and this is how we do things. And these are passed from generation to generation. So our businesses can become vehicles to both export to the global stage and pass down from generation to generation our culture, our legacy, our heritage. The third reason why this is important is that affluence creates access. Wealth opens doors. It is an enabler to making an impact on a global stage. I believe that we are a global village and we have to think on a global scale. So protection from poverty is one reason why we should care, but more importantly, giving your children, your grandchildren, a starting point to soar. That's the ultimate goal. You know the common saying, may the ceiling of this generation be the floor of the next. That's our aspiration. And we're creating an enabling environment for that so that next gens have privilege. They can use their access, their knowledge, their financial capital to make a positive impact on the world in a world that so desperately needs leaders in action. Who am I? I'm a family business insider. I'm sure you might be wondering more about me. I live and breathe family business. So the story is that my parents started off our first business in the family the year I was born. And so entrepreneurship has always been in my life all my life. I relocated to the UK at the age of 9. So I went to university in London. I worked in corporate for a few years, but found myself coming back to Nigeria to discover myself. I then worked in my father's businesses for going on 10 years now, rose through the ranks as a next gen. And along that journey, decided to start helping and working with other families, bridging the gap between generations and family firms through succession planning. so that we can build resilient family enterprises that will withstand the test of time. I'm also a co-founder of African Family Firms, which is a non-profit community of business owners across Africa and the diaspora. So I've taken you very high in the sky and sold you a dream, and a lot of you might be like, Nikia is just, she's an idealist, she's not on this planet, she doesn't know what the realities are that we face. I do know, I'm a business owner myself. Like I said, I also face these issues. In this hour, we're facing a need to diversify urgently, but we are in a completely disrupted world. COVID-19 is a storm that has had a really disruptive effect. And a lot of us have seen declining revenues, profits, cash flows. And it's like a ship that has capsized in the face of a violent storm. And initially the focus was, let's come to surface, let's just survive. But now over time, our focus is getting back on course to ensure that we're moving towards the destination of multi-generational success. But in trying to drive towards this destination, we may encounter debris in the water, forcing us to consider alternative routes. We are looking to diversify the family business urgently, considering other products and services, platforms and paradigms to identify new opportunities that are viable in this changed world, so we arrive at our destination of financial security. But the trouble is, the world is so fast moving. A week is like a month is like a year. And this high level of uncertainty makes it difficult to pinpoint opportunities and to plan to pursue these accordingly. Not only have our businesses been disrupted, but our lifestyles have been disrupted, such that we are time poor, overwhelmed, distracted, so we don't give sufficient time and attention to truly diversifying. Charles Darwin is quoted to have said, "It is not the strongest of species that survives. It is not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change." And change we must to survive in these turbulent times. We may see where we want the family business to go, but unsure precisely how to get there. It's one thing to identify a strategy. It's another thing to implement such that we see impact. It can be a challenge to get staff who may be used to doing the things in an old way to adapt. How do we lead remotely, ensuring that we're maintaining culture? But we need everyone to get it so we can implement this and see an impact. Transformation is hard. Reinvention requires transformation of self and also transformation of a business, which requires leadership. The old leadership comes from an old English word meaning going before as a guide. And as a leader, not only are you going before your organization as a guide, you're also going before yourself as a guide, persuading yourself, keeping yourself accountable so you can navigate the ship of your business. But we must reinvent if we want to leave a transformational legacy. A legacy that means not only financial security for your family, but also leads to a transformed world. Thank you so much. If you'd like to get in touch, you may find out more information on me on my website, www.nikiaanani.com. There, my email address is there, my social media, my podcast. I appreciate we've gone through a lot of content and you might have some questions, so thank you.
I thought that was an absolutely fabulous start to this particular segment. I think that Nike has really drawn up some really pertinent points and flagged, whether it's talking about the single story and the fact that wealth and legacy is not just about money, but it's about culture, it's about value, it's about heritage. And when you think about these well-known family businesses, some of which were quoted by Anne in her speech this morning, as well as mentioned by Pius, if you think about Walmart, if you think about Mercedes, if you think about I think even the luxury lines of Louis Vuitton, or whether you're looking at organizations such as Coca-Cola. All of these actually started off as family businesses. So with that, we're encouraged, because the data on the flip side can also be quite depressing. I think the Harvard Business Review had said globally that it is more than 70%, globally, more than 70% of all family businesses fail before they're taken over by the second generation. So I believe it was one of the other panelists who talked about the saying of shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves. Here we say barefoot to barefoot in 3 generations. And you'll find such an adage spoken about in different parts of the world, because as I've mentioned, this is a global statistic. But that said, we do have all of these experts here who have seen that it can be done differently, who have also contributed to the success of those that make it through and that become multi-generational. I would like to invite Atiq Ajawala to talk a little bit about his practice. He's a partner at one of the leading law firms here in Kenya, which actually has a continental practice. And I actually know, let me take that back. It's not just continental, it's a global practice, because you do have partnerships in the Middle East as well. And so Atiq, if you would introduce yourself, let us know a little bit about the work that you're doing, especially around wealth planning, trust planning, that is part and parcel of what it is that Anjarwalla Khanna does, because I do think that it will, it gives us a little bit of a glimpse of how things can be done differently in order for us to get to success. So Atiq, please introduce yourself and also give us a little bit of how Anjarwalla is helping clients navigate this area.
Thank you very much, Wangechi. And I think I can still say good morning. We have 10 minutes before it's noon.
Yes.
So nice to meet you all. Thanks to Anne and Regal as well for inviting us to participate today. My background is primarily as I used to be a corporate and banking lawyer, practiced in the UK, in Kenya, and as was mentioned, I also look after our Dubai office. But I guess about roughly 15, 18 years ago, a lot of clients started talking to me about next generation issues, succession planning, and all the other topics that we've been discussing today. And I, it's something that intrigued me. And some of the comments made are actually very valid. When you look at, if you look at, for example, the subcontinent, the families that were wealthy at the time of, in the 40s and the 50s in India and Pakistan, almost none of them exist. And I would venture to say that they don't exist in terms of size and substance because of lack of planning. And this intrigued me a lot. And I, delved deep into a lot of the thinking around next generational issues around critically, obviously, capital preservation. You've all worked very hard to build up your businesses. How do you ensure that you capital preserve for the next generation? And then be obviously very realistic about solutions that can or cannot work. The couple of points, I guess, that I'll just make initially, and then I'll pass the baton on. But we have to keep in mind that that legal and tax issues play a very big role in all of this. And what you can plan, say, in Kenya, you can't transpose that in the Middle East. You can't transpose that in other jurisdictions. We work clearly, closely with wealth advisors and other professionals to try and sort of tailor-make solutions that will allow families to pass on wealth intergenerationally, and as I said, to capital preserve. And also one more point that I would like to just initially make quickly is that I would advise the owners of of wealth, be it business or other type of wealth, that trying to impose a solution often is the wrong way of doing this. You really need to be honest and truthful to yourselves about whether the next generation consists of groups of people who can realistically, for example, take over your business. So if they can't, and you force them to take over your business, what will be the outcome then? So here are some of the challenges that we deal with daily. So I'll stop there because it's supposed to be an introduction, hand over, and then we can develop the discussion further.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. You've already talked about tax and legal issues. I think they had also, for those who had managed to join us in the earlier session, that actually was also one of the key takeaways. But I like what you said. You can't just take what works in one country and think that it's going to work in another circumstance. So yes, we will definitely talk about that. But the person I'd like to get their views on right now is actually Professor Rupert Merson. Rupert, sorry, I just said your name wrong. Rupert is an expert in governance. If you allow me, I'm just going to go ahead and read you a little bit about his bio. He's not only he's a non-executive chairman at Dalma Money. He is an accountant, an HR professional. He's also a professor. He has taught in very many prestigious universities. He's also written 4 books on management and growing your business. And we're really, really looking forward to getting your views, Rupert, especially when it comes to the role of governance and what that foundation means for the success of intergenerational wealth and wealth planning. So Rupert, if you would just introduce yourself to our audience, give us your views. Your initial views on what role governance plays when it comes to all of this.
Thank you very much. I would share my video, but I'm not allowed to. The host has stopped me from sharing the video.
Really? So Paul, please fix that.
You can't see my face, I'm afraid. You can't see the fact that I got a haircut yesterday, especially.
Just for us today.
Just for you,
Paul,
yes.
And okay. Regina, please fix that.
Okay, start my video. There you go. You can see now. You can see my haircut. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you wherever you are. It's definitely morning here in London, and the sun is shining, and I don't make that claim very often. Good to talk to you, though. In truth, our mind in the UK is elsewhere at the moment. It's on the football match this evening, which is far more important than any family transfer issue, is it not? Thank you for my introduction. Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said there. I add that I have a degree in English literature, which is a little bit peculiar. After that, I did accountancy. I'm a chartered accountant. I was a partner in a major firm in the UK for a long while. But during that time, I also headed up human resources. So I'm a human resources person as well. I left that firm some 12 years ago now, since when I've run my own firm of advisors. We work on family business issues, amongst other ownership and governance issues relating to the owner-managed business. And the family business, of course, is a distinct category in the owner-managed business. Just a couple of observations I make, maybe building on our last introduction. As a student of literature, I'm very familiar with Tolstoy's line. Some of you might be the opening sentence of Anna Karenina, that all happy families are similar, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. All happy families are similar, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Interesting to consider the implications of that, I've always thought. And implication number one, or perhaps the only real implication I draw from it, or only real inference I draw from it, is that Tolstoy was wrong. Or rather, if Tolstoy was right, he was probably the member of a family business rather than the advisor to a family business. what am I getting at here? Well, the issue is that the key event, the defining event for a family business is succession. That's the defining event. We've heard all these stats about family businesses not lasting beyond the first generation or not going to the third generation or whatever, and they're all true or not, but of course they're only true and only meaningful if we compare them to non-family businesses. And how many non-family businesses last 20 years to the generational point, for example? I think the truth will be that you'll find that very few businesses at all get to the same point as a family business does. Young businesses fail, whether they're family businesses or not. When stats are quoted about family businesses failing, it does frustrate me a little that too infrequently do we set that in the context of business failure in general. However, what is true is that family businesses, or businesses that identify as family businesses, to use the current lingo, struggle with the issue of succession. And in many ways, I would argue that the act of succession, or the attempt to get from one generation to the next, with the family and the business still having a relationship with each other, is the defining act of a family business. However, Patrick Tolstoy, for those who live through succession, it's quite probably the one time that they will have that experience. If they are very lucky and unusual, they might have two goes at it. Once, in other words, when the business is passed to them, and secondly, when they pass the business on to the next generation. But even an experience of doing it twice in a lifetime makes it a very rare experience. So when you go through it, it can seem that nobody has been through it before, because quite possibly you've never been through it before. But for an outsider, for an advisor, for an investor, for a lawyer, for an accountant, for an individual such as myself who focuses a lot on intergenerational transfer, and I see these things all the time. I will be working with businesses 5, 6, 7, 8 times a year, all over the world. I've worked with family businesses in Tanzania, in Somalia, in Kenya, for example, as well as in Europe and in Southeast Asia. And having worked with these types of businesses all the time, in and around acts of transition from one generation to the other, all the time, or very frequently at least, I observe that Tolstoy fundamentally has got it wrong, that each unhappy family in the act of transition from one generation to the other shows a lot of similarity with other family businesses. It might seem unique to them at the time, because they've never been through it before. But for those of us who look at from the outside in, we see the same old things arising time and time again, the same challenges, the same problems, the same solutions, or rather, can I put it another way, the same failure to adopt the solutions that other family businesses have learned from and benefited from. So welcome to this occasion. Occasions like this, when we can share our expertise and insight, are opportunities for us to buck the trend, to prove Tolstoy wrong, to prove the statisticians wrong, or at least to change the odds, to learn from each other, to identify that the problems that we have, somebody else has suffered before and is suffering now. And if we pool our expertise as we're doing today, Tolstoy will be wrong, and we will change those stats, at least, for family businesses. Business survival will still be difficult because businesses fail, but as far as the specific family business challenge is concerned, we stand a better chance of doing about it. How about that? Enough from me, I think, for the moment.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for that, Rupert. I like that you've posited that Tolstoy got it wrong. Let's just hope that Malcolm Gladwell, when he talked about the 10,000 hours of expertise, got it right, because that's what that's the experience that the advisors that you would select to help you through succession will hopefully have had under their belt with their collective experience. So we're going to hear from Tsitsi Mutendi. She's also our panelist today, and she is founder and lead consultant at the NACA Legacy Planning. She's also co-founder of African Family Firms that Nick talked about in her video, and we really can't wait to hear from you, Tsitsi. You're also you've been recognized by the Athena 40, and yeah, and just a note about our speakers, you're all like award-winning, and you've been recognized for your expertise in your industry by your peers, and so we're really happy to have you here. Tsitsi also has a podcast called Enterprising Families. She specializes in helping family businesses build multi-generational legacies. So Tsitsi, go ahead, introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about NACA Legacy Planning, and really just what your initial view would be on how we can make this generational wealth transfer smoother than it currently is.
Thank you so much for a kind introduction, and thank you so much for the organizers of this event. So as you heard, my name is Tsitsi Mutendi. I am a third-generation family business owner. So that means my grandparents on both my father and my mother's side were all family business owners, and I myself am a family business owner. So besides working with family businesses, I'm an insider. I have walked the path of building family businesses, seen them in different generations of the family, and experience the impact of how building family businesses can be a beautiful thing, and also it can be a heartbreaking thing. I started mainly in this space where I work with family businesses in legacy building and family governance, especially because I lost my dad about 4 years ago. So when my dad passed on, I had the responsibility of being the executor of his estate, as well as trying to pretty much put together a legacy for him and honor his legacy, and remind everybody in the family why it was so important and why all the work that he had done was so important. And it was in that journey that I myself realized that as a family business owner, as entrepreneurs, we usually focus on the business metrics of any organization that we're building. We're looking at perfecting our marketing, our accountancy. We're looking at making sure those taxes are sorted. We're looking to make sure that HR is hiring correctly and so forth. But we tend to forget the most important element of businesses and family businesses, to be exact, which is the family itself. We can't avoid our family. We raise our family, our children grow up surrounded by the business, impacted by the business, and decisions we make, sacrifices we make to ensure that they have a financial security in the future. And as we do this, we tend to forget the fact that the relationships that we are trying to build professionally as well as personally are very intricate. And family businesses, one of the biggest things that I found that within generation from generation, we have all experienced family businesses that have been high flyers, that have provided incredible services. But these family businesses just collapsed as soon as the owner passed on. And similar to the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, we also have the thought process that usually when the founder dies, the company dies with them, which should not be the fact and which should not be the truth, because at the end of the day, what's really important is nurturing relationships. Businesses are essentially building relationships between the company and its clients or its customers, the product and the consumers, and most importantly, the relationship with the family. The family itself is the team that is the people that is going to create the processes that's going to keep those goods and services available for other clients, for customers, as well as build community and also leave impactful legacy through work that they do, through the wealth they amass, philanthropy, causes, supporting causes, and being figureheads in our societies. So what I've found in the work that I do is the most important thing that we do not focus on when it comes to family governance is getting the family itself to work together as a team. And as the previous speaker mentioned, it's like looking at a soccer team. When you're looking at a soccer team and everybody is on the pitch, imagine that is the family, and they're also supposed to be scoring their goal into a net. But if they don't know where they stand, they don't know what position they're playing, they don't know what the goal is, you'll find that they will lose the game and their family business will fade away because they weren't working towards a combined goal. So every day, this is the work I do to champion family businesses with my partner, Nike, that you heard from. We work with African family firms to ensure that family businesses in Africa become that guiding light as we face a new space where Africa is going to be leading in the world, a new space where we have the last frontier when it comes to food production, when it comes to mineral resources, and when it comes to the youngest population on the globe. So we have to also really look at the skill set that we're building, and that is going to be able to lift up the banner of Africa economically.
Thank you for that, Tsitsi. I like what you said about relationship and the fact that family business is about relationship, right? And it's a relationship across all those aspects that you've reminded us of. And I also like what you said about the family being the team, right? And of course, using that sports analogy to help us paint that picture. We're going to hear from our well, not our last, but our other panelist, Gregor Panicke. I hope I've said your last name right, Gregor. He's a managing partner at Agema Analysts, and they are investment and risk advisors. Gregor has a background in law as well as an MBA. He is really well known in not only corporate law, but also intellectual property. He does quite a bit of consulting, and in this work, really focuses on risk management. And so, Gregor, it would be really good to hear your views about how this element of risk management can be, can be considered, especially within family businesses, or as Rupert said, within businesses generally, but in this particular instance, family businesses more specifically.
Thank you much, Manchi, for introducing me. Thank you much, panelists and audience for attending here, and thank you much NHD and Regal Africa for organizing this great event and with such great panelists. And introduce myself. I'm the managing partner of Agema Analysts. We are here office in Nairobi, looking to sub-Saharan Africa and to be helpful and support here as well. Family business wealth planning. I have an office in Dubai as well, and our two offices in Freiburg and in Hamburg in Germany, where we're not doing only family business structuring, but as well legal and risk investment advisory as well. Maybe quickly to the risk aspect. From my background, for the last 13 years, I was working as a general counsel before I actually established my own practice. There are 8 years I was working in shaping with the family, actually their family succession plan, shaping their management, their future expectation of their family members. So my insights I'm going to share are pretty much from a real, so actually the problems and how to manage it in a family business. And I assume many similar problems also here in Africa in big families where you have a lot of siblings, family members. Probably some are in Europe, probably some are in other parts in Africa, or even in North America, and having asset classes all over 3 or 4 continents, which is quite a complexity, how to manage it, how to make sure that the family maintains their values, their vision, and their drive actually to continue as a family business. And as Rupert Merson said, it's really a family business starts when a transition actually is triggered. I think it's very crucial to understand the DNA of a family at this point of time. And the risk part actually is not only who would be the right manager or the right talent to manage and to further the business is also, do you have the right processes, procedures, and the right documents? A lot of legal considerations for me being licensed lawyers in Germany, by practice a lawyer. I see risk on a lot of different aspects from a tax side, from a legal structuring side, but as well from the documentation side, and to those procedure documentation. You need to think at an early stage about succession planning, which can be very, very challenging. Discussing actually situation of death, what would be happening, and how family members would be involved in succession planning or not. And I think it's a very sensitive topic, and from my experience, it requires a lot of patience, a lot of understanding sensitivity, and as far as like understanding of dynamics of a family, DNA, literally how the culture and the family actually works, and to understand also cultural differences. For us, we're working with family businesses in Germany and Europe, which definitely have a more rational and more constructive approach to many family problems. Where in the Middle East, for example, you really have to have a strong connection to the family to understand the culture, to understand the sensitivities, and to understand the family dynamics, which is much more complex, I would say, and more emotional, rather than some European examples we have. And the same would apply as well for Africa.
Well, thank you for that. I like what you said about, the fact that some of the ways in which we can manage this risk is by having these conversations early. I think that was also alluded to in an earlier session today, where the lawyer who was on the panel actually read something from a judgment, because in Kenya, we have all these stories. Our newspapers are peppered with stories of, intestacy, or even succession battles being played out in court. People are claiming to be part of a family. You have siblings themselves. You have, whether it's the extended family that maybe were co-founders of a business, but, things just sort of go pear-shaped in the midst of all the succession, either because those conversations were not had early, or perhaps it goes to what Anne was talking about. There's the idea that you're putting this generational, this huge foundation or fortune together with the idea that your children are going to take it over. So you either put off giving those, having those suggestions, or passing on those reins, as Atik talked about in his introduction, and those things are happening much later, or they're not happening at all, and the founder passes on. Or you're thinking that my children are really competent, they're going to go ahead and they're going to do this anyway, and we're going to assume it's inherent. Where do non-family members come in? Does it continue to be called a family business where you have more non-family members either in management? So I think it would be nice to really just unpack some of these ideas, and I'll begin with you, Atik. If we could, you could give us a little bit of your experience about how you get your clients to start talking about this, to start planning, so that we don't hear about them in the news, because I do think that the things that end up in newspapers and courtrooms were as a result of something breaking or something going wrong, and not necessarily something that was planned. So how do you begin these conversations with your clients? What's sort of like I don't want to call it a trend, but what do you what strikes you most about some of these conversations, and what triggers these conversations to begin? Let's hear from you first, Atik.
Thanks, Manjiki. So look, I think what is happening is that issues that you see in public, clearly drive people to start thinking about planning. Clearly, age is another trigger, because people realize that, I'm 62 or 65, my energy levels are getting a bit less. What am I going to do with my business? I think COVID has had a massive impact. We've seen in terms of people contacting us, huge increase post-COVID, because I guess we've all realized that our mortality is much more challenged, or that we're not immortal. And so I think it's a combination of all of this. It's talking to people who have already undertaken the process successfully. So it's a mixture of reasons why people come to us and talk to us. And in terms of the process, here are a couple of, I would say, a few key takeaway points, which hopefully will be of interest to the audience in terms of how we prep the family. So, we first divide local and international assets. That's the first issue, because especially if we have, for example, freehold land in Kenya, you own coffee estates, etc., you can't actually impose an offshore structure because of the restrictions on foreign ownership of land. This is one technical point I'm raising, but you can understand why it's so important to distinguish between overseas and local assets, because a sort of succession structure, being it a trust or something else that might work offshore, would not work locally. We run through the classes of assets. If it's a company owning a high value business, clearly, all the discussions we've had so far on next generation issues and so on and so forth, much more alive and much more important even when it comes to governance, as compared to, say, a large pot of cash, which you can sort of basically divide quite easily, among your family. When it comes to business assets, what I tend to do is I have a process where, with the blessing of the patriarch, we go through a confidential, and I repeat that, confidential fact-finding tour, if you like, of the main stakeholders. Because what we find is that there's, we pull out all the points of misalignment, and it's incredible because culturally, especially if you look at, sort of East African and even frankly subcontinent families, because of social hierarchy and respect for elders and so on and so forth, there is no way that a younger child will be telling his dad, listen, I think you're running this business really badly, or, I have this idea or that idea. And what we find is that process is quite cathartic, because what it does is, it highlights to, especially the owner, that all is not necessarily well. And it's actually quite a helpful process in trying to build on areas where there is commonality, and of course, repair areas where there is a breakdown. Because as I said when I made the introduction, there's no point imposing a structure which people inherently don't accept. And the way I like to call it is having a joint family vision or a joint family social contract. If you can build a family social contract by and large, then I think you are on you're clearly on a better journey. So we sort of go through that, and that and that can take quite a few months. I did one for a family with a lot of assets in West Africa, and when we got I already suspected it, but when I got the feedback, or advice to the family actually was, it was 4 sets of families, so brothers. One of them had passed away. That listen, there is no way you can be in business together. And once we've made that statement openly, in an open forum, they actually came to thank us at the end, because that's actually what they all believed, but because of social pressure, etc., they couldn't actually say that. So I think that for me, that's a very critical part of the discussion. Obviously, there's so many layers to this which you simply cannot do justice on, on a very long event like this. But a lot of the cultural issues, for example, do daughters join the business? There's a lot of concern with families about the in-laws. Yeah, be it the in-laws on the male side, the female side. How do you deal with that? children born outside of marriage, what are the risks that come with all of that. So there's a whole host of issues that we sort of put into the pot. And after that, start to look for solutions that hopefully can be beneficial. In many cases, people like lifetime solutions, because if you have a solution that will apply post your death, as we know from the newspapers, as you mentioned, Wanjiki, there's lots of examples where wills are challenged. So at least in the East African context, particularly Kenya and Uganda. So, many clients are now looking for solutions in their lifetime. There can be quite a few tax challenges around that, because, there are, of course, some now amendments that have come through our Finance Act, which would be helpful. But otherwise, before that, you have to be quite clever how you tax plan around movement of assets during the lifetime. So let me stop there. I want everybody else to say something as well, but hopefully that was a useful start.
Absolutely. And what I'm hearing from what you've said, and also from what was mentioned by Tsitsi, is really how crucial and how important it is for honest communication. I like what you talked about, having a confidential session where people can really be open, and they can give really honest feedback and state their positions very clearly, because it is through that clear communication that things can then be planned. I also like what you've mentioned about lifetime solutions. I'm going to pick up on that and ask Tsitsi to tell us how she weaves that into this idea of legacy planning. Because, well, okay, I'll give you my bias. When I hear legacy planning, I think of, multi-generational, right? It's also a little bit of, is it going to be my way, for my children and my children's children, because I'm the one who started this business. But then again, you've got what Atik just talked about, lifetime solutions. So how do those sometimes seemingly contradictory statements come together when you're looking at legacy planning, Tsitsi?
Thank you for that question. I think what's really important is collaboration. Collaboration within the family, within family members, to get from one generation to another. The conversation that is not happening is looking at how big the family grows as it expands from one generation to another. I'll give an example of a family business that started with just probably the parents in partnership, and they have 3 children. That's what we'd say is generation 1. These are the founders, and their value systems, the way they do business, the things that they hold dear as a family become a template, and also their history, the lessons that they've learned from other family members that they've brought into this space becomes a part of them, their identity, their values, and their history, as well as then projecting into the future, because you have the children who've been learning under these values, who've embodied these traditions, who are now taking it forward. But it's the taking it forward that becomes an interesting discussion, because from just the 3 children who may or may not be interested in the family business, who may or may not be interested in wanting to work for the family business, they become a sibling partnership because they become probably heirs and shareholders, because their parents give them the shares to the business, and they become owners of this business. And sibling partnerships in themselves can be very intricate relationships where you have to navigate the fact that you are co-owners. You might have some of the siblings working for the businesses, some not working for the business, how they relate to each other, how they work collaboratively to push forward the values, the impact, the philanthropy, and everything that the family business was already providing for the community around it. And when you're thinking generational legacy, you're then taking it from just a sibling partnership and going to the cousin consortium, where these 3 children get married, have their own families, and let's say, for example, they have 5 children per child. You've already got 15 different partners or owners that are part of this family business who may or may not work for the family business. And so the legacy is, how many of these values that you're taking from the founder are going to have continuity? How many conversations around how we do things around here as a family are going to be taken in continuity? How is the next gen going to interact with what's already there and bring their own part of the story into this intricate weaving of the family legacy as well as the family business? So it's a lot of collaboration that has to happen, a lot of communication, a lot of understanding each other, of also understanding perspective. You find that sometimes we have vantage points that are not similar to other people. You have family members who may not have experienced the same thing in the same way as other family members. I always give this example of, if you think of Bill Gates, when he started his company, it's famous that he started it from his garage. And let's say at that time he had a child, and this child went through a certain period of time where the Bill Gates we know now hadn't yet evolved. And then let's say he has a child now, where the Bill Gates we know now has evolved and grown wealth and has different viewpoints to the world. This child will also come into a situation which is completely different from their own sibling. And so understanding each other, being able to work with each other's strength, and understanding what the situation on the ground is. I think the previous speaker was very clear in that you need to understand what is really going on. You need to speak to each other, and you need to know who has what and why, and what is driving them, because our experiences are very much based on our vantage points. Our legacy are then those things that are taken forward from the values, the work, the impact, and the thought process that we put out there and people look at and appreciate from what we're doing.
I love that statement. The experience is based on our vantage point. And I'd like to pivot that and ask Gregor what he thinks, what his experience really has been, especially with the fact that, families we're now global citizens, with or without the pandemic. Everybody is living and working in different parts of the world, yourself included. So how do these different viewpoints, these different experiences, how do those come into play? Again, when you're looking at these different constituents, and when it comes to generational planning.
Absolutely, Ungechi. Thank you very much for your question. I think it starts everything with cultural awareness and understanding a little bit, and having the empathy for understanding and appreciating culture, because this is very much the fundamental of family business. It's more or less the rule book a family plays by its vision, by its culture, by its reputation in a society, and to understand what does it mean for a family, and how to translate it then into succession planning. Now, for me, I have a German background. I lived, I think, for most of my life, or let's say 15, 16 years in the Middle East, and now in Africa, and still having mandates in the Middle East. So I think from my experiences, it's very important to listen to a family, to understand what their concerns are, the dynamics, the DNA I just mentioned before. I can't re-emphasize it enough, and to really understand and try to grasp what I want to achieve. And I think what many advisors probably do wrong, or people who work with family businesses, also lawyers, is they probably don't listen enough, and they try to find quick solutions for problems which are more complex and more emotional, and especially family business, where empathy is required, and understanding and appreciating the family. So I don't believe that you can just plug in and meet the family and you believe you understand probably where the journey goes in terms of succession planning, governance, inclusiveness of family members, and how to address all those topics. I think there's a relationship building needed, and around that, once you actually create a way forward or a platform where a family is open to discuss it. And for example, families in the Middle East, they're generally, especially the bigger conglomerates, they're much more conservative in sharing information, even with other family members or with the outside. So confidentiality, secrecy, and how to treat sensitive topics are very key. In Europe or in Germany, family members or family businesses are much more transactional. They're more rational. They do talk about, even openly, even with others, with external advisors, without having those boundaries, or not the same boundaries probably would have in the Middle East. And I think to understand those differences, I think it's very important to add value and to be a value advisor or a guide or support in family succession planning. That's my humble thought.
Sorry about that. But yes, thank you for talking about that. I like what you said about empathy being part and parcel of the process, and actually with Rupert's background as an HR professional, could you please weigh in a little bit on this, and how do you get people to go beyond what is, I guess, the rule book when it comes to the creation and the governing of these different, whether it's family businesses or different instruments for generational wealth planning. How do you sort of go beyond what is just written down to something that is being lived out by that family?
Well, I would go back
from your experience.
I go back and challenge some of the assumptions that we're working on at the moment, and some of the things that have been said already. Actually, we've started to talk quite a bit about solutions, and you've asked me to talk about solutions already. But part of the problem that you've got with family businesses is understanding the problem. And one of our speakers has suggested we need to listen to what it is that our family businesses want and what they're asking for, which I agree with, of course. But the truth is that many family businesses don't know what it is that they want or what it is that they should ask for, with either the consequence that they don't ask for anything, they let history take over and kill them, or they ask for the wrong thing. And my experience as an advisor is one of the first things you need to do is to challenge the problem that is being posed to you in the first place. Quite often it's the wrong problem from our experience, my experience, that the family is attempting to address, or it's an incomplete problem. So rather than looking towards a specific solution of one sort or elements of a solution, can I suggest that the first thing that is needed is education? And I'm exercising my prejudice there, of course, as an educator. But many of my processes, not all, because there's never such a thing as all in any business environment, but many of my processes will start with education. And many of my educational processes will start with a workshop for the family, not for a member of it, but for the family. And we'll bring along as many people as possible. Quite often, not always, one of the rules we will have in our educational session is that the one business we won't talk about is yours. We'll talk about everybody else's businesses, but we won't talk about yours. Of course, everybody is thinking about their own business, but we're not going to talk about it. We're going to talk about other businesses, other geographies, other problems, other solutions. And you see the penny dropping around the room, of course, about things that are similar to what's going on in this particular business, not just about solutions that might work, but also problems that we have that we're not even acknowledging that are problems in the first place. So that's one thing that I think that we haven't talked about before. We need an educated cast before we can start playing the football game, to mix a metaphor or two. Out of that, quite often in my experience, what happens is one huge and significant realization that when you're talking succession, you're not talking event, you're not even talking process. I often hear that contrast. You're talking about something that's fundamental to the definition of this being a family business. You're talking about something that we need as a family to be engaging with all the time. And that often means a significant change of mindset on behalf of every member in the family and the family business and the business network, including those managers who are working for the family business who are not family, and those family members who are reluctantly involved in this system, whether they like it or not, but want to go off and be TV producers or poets rather than get involved in the business at all, whether they like it or not. They're all part of this particular system and need to be taken forward. So I think if you get those sorts of foundational changes in place in the first place, then I think that you can make some progress towards some solution, whether it's on paper, whether it's attitudinal, whether it's governance. In some ways is neither here nor there. It will be all of those things. It will be none of those things. It will involve external lawyers and accountants, as well as specialist family business advisors. And each thing will be different, but there'll be elements of similarity there. But you need to build those platforms in the first place. Just one last thing. When I'm approached as an advisor, I'm never approached by a family. I'm approached by an individual. And there's a big difference between an individual in a family and a family. For example, and hopefully obviously, the individual who comes along might already know what the problem is, might already know what the solution is. On more than one occasion, I have been asked to present to the rest of the family what the first individual's idea of the solution is. And my job apparently is to persuade the family that dad or mum's solution is the right one for them. And that's what we should be doing. As well as that being an educational challenge, of course, it's an advisory challenge. Critically important as an advisor that you dissociate yourself from the one individual or any individual and address the needs of the family business itself as a bigger and a broader concern. That's very difficult to do, very difficult to achieve successfully. But as I say, the one moment that you have got a sense from the family that you are acting prejudicially in the interests of one person's solution, one person's vision, then as an advisor, you're not acting for a family business, you're acting for an individual within it. And that's a very different exercise going in a very different direction.
That's I guess you're sort of acting as a fiduciary almost, right? In your role as an advisor. Well, not on the monetary end of it, but just in the sense of just stewarding the process as opposed to being part of the process, or allowing your own individual biases as opposed to the overall view of the entire organization.
Yes, bias. Yeah, bias is something we haven't talked about. Bias, prejudice, and not in the political sense that meets the newspapers, but prejudice in the sense of acting in the prejudicial interests of one stakeholder rather than another. And part of the problem with family businesses is you have first generations and second generations and third generations. You have individuals within generations. You have people who are not in the family at all, but are in the business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They all have their prejudicial view or prejudicial non-view. I do remember in one instance, the role of grandma who, bless her, probably didn't even know where the business was, let alone what industry it was in, but played a critical role in intergenerational transfer. Why? Because grandma was the only person everybody respected. When grandma was in the room, everybody behaved. Right. And we ran workshops with grandma in the room, contributing nothing to the process other than by means of her presence, which was hugely influential. When we suggested that it would be useful if grandma participated in the workshops, complete shock and horror. Why would grandma be here? She's never been here before. She's got no role to play at all. You're missing the point. You're missing the point about the interconnected thing that a family business is, and the importance of taking this as a, I hate the word, but I use it, holistic system that we need to address rather than one or other stakeholder within it.
And you know, and talking about stakeholders, I think Tsitsi had alluded to that when she talked about the cousin consortium and the sibling partnerships. Tsitsi, is there a way where, especially when you have you know, all these instances where family members are not necessarily interested in running the business, but they remain shareholders of this business, or to use a broader word, stakeholders in it, right? Because they are from that particular family that founded it. How do you bring in the non-family members in order to continue to grow this business? How do you put in the role of those who are not working in the business so that they are not, those who are working in the business don't feel as if they're put out, or as if they're working on behalf of all these other people, and, you know, much to the, I guess, much perhaps to the what they view as detriment to their own individual families, whereas others are just, you know, reaping dividend. How do you manage those dynamics?
Thank you for that. I don't know if you have the facility to allow me to share my screen briefly so that I can just show you.
No, but Paul does. Does Paul, it's Paul on the call. Can he do that for us? Or Regina? There you go. Now you have it. Co-host.
Okay,
you can share.
So I am just looking for something that we use in the family business advisory space called the 3-circle model. So this is a model that we use when we look at family businesses and the family business system, as well as the family system, and how it interacts with each other. You'll find that most of the time when people are thinking of family businesses, they think of it as each of the circles as independent from each other, and they don't really understand the fact that they are not independent from each other, but they're correlated. So you'll see on your screen here, this is the 3-circle model that was developed by John A. Davis et al. And it speaks to family businesses and the intricacies of how they run and how the different systems impact. So if you see with here, there's the circle of ownership, there's the circle of family, and the circle of the business itself. At any given point in time, you find that these circles have a push and pull factor which interact with each other. You, like you said, you will have some family members who, when you start off in the family business, you have usually the owners are the families, the owners and the employees of the family business. But as the family business grows and there's multiple investments and you become these big corporates and conglomerates and so forth, you realize that not only do they have them falling here, but then you have interactivity between family members in other circles where you have children who may inherit the family business who say, I don't want to work for the family business. I want to be independent. I want to follow my own path. And they still remain very much in that ownership circle. And then you get those people who might have interest in the business where you get loans or you sell equity in the business to other people who are not family members, who are very much impacted by decisions family or family members that are not owners but are employed by the family business. So as you can see, there's multiple ways that the family, the business, and ownership interact with each other. Sitting down, being able to identify what's going on, who plays what part, and why it's really important is essential to making a family business work. It's very much rooted in family governance and also in corporate governance, because they can't work independent of each other but have to be collaborative in the way it works. And you have to be very careful in understanding that and having family members saying we are not part of the family business in terms of working for the family business is a step that a lot of family businesses have to take at some point where you have family members who are not interested in the industry, not interested in the runnings of the business, but they're owners. Teach them how to be owners, teach them how to understand what ownership means and what their obligations as owners are. And at the same time, you can be an owner of the family business and attract the right non-family members, employees that can work to push forward the combined goal of making the family business work. Because at the end of the day, the family business is a source of wealth. The family enterprise is a source of wealth. It's the one thing that keeps us together in terms of financial collaboration. And when you're an owner, you start realizing this and you want to hire and attract non-family employees because they're there to ensure that the family business keeps on running, it keeps on prospering, and that we all as family members who are dependent on this family business continue to be in that wealth bracket that was founded by the people who set up the family business itself.
If I can just butt in there a little bit, I agree with everything she said there, but you can't exclude the possibility that are family members who don't want to be part of the system and don't want to be part of the wealth system either, and to work on an assumption that everybody is going to continue in perpetuity it's not going to happen. Indeed, it's interesting to look at the longest and oldest family businesses on the planet, those that are member of the 200-year-old club. I can't remember what it's called now, 7th, 8th, 9th generation family businesses. And one of the striking things that you observe about is how many of them have kept the act of family ownership to a very exclusive crew. They pick and choose which family members are going to be shareholders in the business from one generation to the next. That doesn't mean that they throw out onto the mountaintop those family members who are not so selected. They have a duty and responsibility to make sure those non-business family members' interests are looked after and safeguarded, of course. But there is something about the longest surviving family businesses that includes not just a process for folding and keeping family businesses in, family members in, but also mechanisms for selecting between family business members. And it's an uncomfortable truth that we need to face up to as we're taking decisions as family businesses going forward. Otherwise, just one little mathematical thing for you. If on the continent of Africa, to use numbers that have been given already, each child is going to have 5 children of their own, and each of them is going to have 5 children. I can assure you that the family is likely to be growing a lot quicker than the business. Or at the very least, the pace of growth of the business is not going to be the same as the pace of the growth of the family. So there is a tension there that has to be dealt with, whether we like it or not.
I think just to add on to what you're saying, Rupert, sorry, Wangethi.
No, go ahead, Tsitsi.
I completely agree with what you're saying. Obviously, as your family grows bigger, it's very important to then ensure that the family business is also as robust as the family itself. You can't stay at the same position and continue the small family business and expect it to be able to cater to multiple members of the family. And I think to further what you were saying, one of the most intricate and public situations that have happened is with the British royal family. It's a family business that's been around for 1,000 years or so. And we saw that a family member said, I no longer want to be part of this, but they weren't kicked out as a family member. They just decided, this is not for me. I do not want to participate, and they decided to choose something else, and which is something that happens with families. It just becomes a discussion within the family that has to happen, as in, how do we navigate this? And when this happens, what are the best practices for us as a family, or what systems and procedures do we need to go through as a family to make sure that it's a transition that doesn't tear apart the family nor tear apart the business itself?
Well said, Tsitsi. I actually, going back to Rupert's point, Ate, could you please weigh in a little bit on what Rupert touched on, just because we had talked about lifetime solutions. and it seems as if this idea where you get to pick and choose who participates in the business or who doesn't seems to go a little bit. This is me making an assumption, which is a terrible thing, but making an assumption that these rules were made much earlier and they're being followed in a subsequent generation. So how does that sort of lifetime solution sort of fit with some of what Rupert has discussed?
Yeah, look, thank you. These are all obviously very valid and critical points, and points that certainly I will bring up. I mean, we're finding that if you take many Kenyan families, there are stakeholders who are now living in the US or the UK or some other part of the world, okay? And there is an inherent tension because the family members who are in Kenya are often seen as being entitled, right? Because they earn a salary, they have a nice 4-wheel drive car, which is owned by the business, so on and so forth. And these are very critical open issues that have to be discussed very early on, and what I call the sort of social family contract, and where I think particularly the patriarch has to think through some of these issues very carefully. They touch on issues of liquidity. So if I'm in America and I'm no longer interested in the family business, how can I potentially sell my stake? And we know that that can be quite complicated because many of our businesses may be asset rich but cash light, right? So there might not be a pot of funds to do that. Look at issues like, say, dividend policy. Generally people don't like to pay dividends, but if you want to keep people happy, if dividends are being paid to stakeholders who are not directly involved, they see some value in the business. So it's a multiplicity of issues that these challenges are real, and there's a multiplicity of ways to sort of tackle this. I represent a family in Tanzania, an old Asian family, where there are now, I think the latest count was 123 shareholders ultimately. People have like 0.5% and 2% and 0.6%. And like what they do is, they have, obviously it's much more difficult now with COVID, but they would normally have 2 events a year where, all the family would coalesce at a nice venue for a day. There would be during the day, the sort of board would present the plans of the previous year's performance, the plans for the future, and the afternoon would be basically family time where cousins over different in different geographies would meet and catch up. The aim was to create a sort of sense of family, and the businesses. I mean, there are of course tensions, but by and large, they're now a generation, I think 3.5 roughly. And the business survives. But the point was that steps were taken early on to recognize some of these tensions, and to find solutions which are not perfect, but which so far have been allowing the family to move ahead, and for the family by and large to recognize that it is their family business. So steps have been taken for allowing the younger generation who want to join the business to have the ability to come in, obviously based on performance. So it's a multitude of quite complicated arrangements that have to be thought through to allow these businesses to grow and for the families to feel that they own it. No easy solutions, yeah, and it requires a couple of people at the right at the top of the chain, if you like, of ownership, to think about the business as not as their own, but for the family. And then to start working through to try and find systems and solutions that would allow the business to sustain. And of course, as has been pointed out, there are businesses that have sustained like that. And the question, I think the challenge to us is, if businesses in Europe have survived generationally, why shouldn't they in our part of the world?
Thank you for that, Atik. I really like that. So if these businesses have survived for generations, some of these that Rupert has pointed out that are 8th, 9th generation, if those are taking place and those have happened, why not have that same kind of legacy happening here on the continent? We're just about to wrap up, and I really thank all our panelists for this really interesting and engaging discussion that we've all been having. You know, we started off with Nike's video, where she was challenging us about the single story and to be careful that the family business is not a single story. It's not a single story about money, but it is about legacy. It is about wealth. It's about values. It's about culture. It's about heritage. And we've seen that interwoven through all the discussions that we've been having in the last hour. And I really do appreciate that. So before we close out today, I'm going to ask our panelists to give us all a parting shot, or at least something for us to consider before we close this panel. And I'm going to start with you, Gregor, if you would like to go ahead and you know, give us your final take.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mangeshi. I think probably the three topics, the main lessons I would share from my humble experiences, developing and introducing sustainable family governance and family succession planning requires, you know, as a stakeholder, advisor, whoever, no matter how you are involved within the process, crucial time, patience, and awareness creation, a lot of communication, boosting communication, inclusiveness, and really understanding family dynamics, understanding culture, heritage, values, and vision of the family, and those structures should be definitely reflect those principles. And again, don't rush when designing and implementing family frameworks. It's a dynamic process subject to change. And my experience just lately, that the management of one family conglomerate changed, has been decided, and one you know, significant manager left, which a family member, which you know, required a rethinking of the family, how the succession planning should go. And I think it's very important to have a dynamic structure, to be open for developments. A family is dynamic, a family is diverse, a family is has a lot of surprises, and I think a family structure and succession planning needs to reflect that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Gregor. And then we're going to go over to Tsitsi now. Do you please give us your parting shot for our audience for this afternoon?
Yes, absolutely. I think because this conference is very much focused on the African continent, I'd just like to say for the family businesses out there, it's a process. Growth is a process within itself. Building legacy is a process within itself. As a continent, we're relatively still very young in these spaces. We have a lot of issues that are inherited from our past, a lot of things that we still need to understand that influence our decision-making and the way we do things every day. It's important for us as family businesses to realize that the future conversation of Africa is no longer rooted in politics, but is more rooted in economy and making stronger economies and impactful conversations around wealth, around growth, and understanding who we are as a people and understanding what we bring to the table. And then obviously giving back and planning ahead, because whatever we're doing now is not for ourselves, but for our grandchildren. And we need to be proud of what we leave for them and the legacies we build for them.
Thank you for that, Tsitsi. Rupert, over to you.
Yeah, we've run out of time. I'll keep it brief. Get help. Start early. How about that?
Perfect. Very succinct. Atik.
I'll be succinct as well. And my advice is to the current owners of family businesses, the people in charge, be honest and open about what you want to achieve. And I think that's critical. And then as has been mentioned, seek help from the right people who can hold your hand through the process.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our amazing panel. We truly appreciate your time, and to the 90 participants who have stayed with us throughout this session. We do appreciate all of you.